national championship contending men's. That is where a lot of this is coming from, and I think that in general, a lot of the principles that we'll talk about will be broadly applicable, but if you feel like it's not connecting with the team that you're playing on, please feel free to probe those questions in the chat, and we'll see if we can come up with something that works for you and for your team. The most important thing, or my most important goal for this conversation is not that you start playing zone offense the way that I think you should, but rather that your team zone offense improves. So however we can do that, that's what we're really after. Sounds good? Sweet. So I'm gonna do a little bit of talking about the structure of zone defense so that we can talk about how we are gonna disrupt that structure. I'm gonna try to weave in some video clips and a little bit of principles of movement. And we'll have plenty of time to ask questions and talk through all of that good stuff. Cool. I'm going to share the extremely rudimentary presentation to share, and here it goes. So the first thing that we really want to talk about is what we want to do as a zone offense. And I think that the first thing that I want to start with is that we hear a lot that you should be patient, and that patience is like the biggest virtue in zone offense. Can everyone see this clip? Christy, can you see the video clip?
No, I can't.
A gray, like it's all covered in gray.
Let me try it again. How about now?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
Yes.
So in this video clip, this is from the second point of the men's final from this last club season. We get a big hammer to the young man who has the disc on the sideline. We always get told to be patient with zone offense, and that is exactly what Keegan is going to do right here. So he's very patient, doesn't do anything dicey, and then runs out of options and takes a 25-yard dump. When at the beginning of this clip, what you see is in the middle of the field, there is a guy wide open. Two, in fact. And as we go forward in the clip, we don't get them, and then by now they're not really open anymore, and we are totally out of options. So I think the biggest thing that I want to emphasize to start out this conversation is that we want to be patient when it helps us to be patient, but in general, we want to make sure that we are making intentional attacking moves as much as possible. So that's where we're going to start with our principles of zone offense. Make intentional, timely attacking throws. So sometimes that means making a throw right away, and other times it means waiting for something to open up. But we're making intentional, timely attacking throws. And then the two movement principles that we want to talk about are compressing the defense and extending the defense. So I'm going to get back to some notes here. Zone defenses, to set up their structure, and Dave, like I said, talked really well about this the previous week, but zone defense, when they are able to calibrate the distance between defensive players and the downfield threats, while at the same time seeing the thrower. So if we let them stay right where they want to be and get that perfect distance so that they can guard more of the field, then they are much better off. broadly speaking, I think that there are two kinds of zone defenses. Those that put a lot of pressure on the thrower to pass, so zone defenses that trap on the sideline, or like a four-person cup that makes upfield throws really difficult. So that's one kind, the high pressure on the thrower. And the others, like notably UMass and Dig had a 1-3-3 that doesn't put a lot of pressure on the thrower immediately and rather instead tries to bait longer throws. These defenses thrives when their defenders can calibrate those distances to either take advantage of you making a tough throw or trick you into thinking something is open that it's not. So zones in general do that by trying to take up more space on the field, organizing the defenders around spaces instead of people. So their goal is to have defenders like attacking area or effective area be as perfectly tangent to each other as possible. So if you imagine drawing a circle around each defender that you see on the field, those circles should be just barely touching so that the defenders are taking up as much space on the field as possible without either being redundant with each other or leaving big gaps in between each other. And so that being the heart of zone, what we want to do as an offense is, as much as possible, make those defensive players either spread out from each other or be redundant with each other. So those are the two big moves that we want to do, like I said in our principles, to either compress them so they are becoming redundant with one another, or to extend them so that the gaps between them are as big as possible. In general also, and there are lots of exceptions to this, zones, we're going to talk about zones and how to break them down by talking about 3 tiers of the defense. So that's going to be the front field, the midfield, and the deep space. So the front field being the area like 5 yards deep of the disc and closer or behind. That's the front field. The mid is anywhere from like 5 or so yards downfield from the disc to about 25 yards downfield. And then the deep space is anything deeper than that. So when we think of ways to break down zone defense, we want to attack by compressing and extending both within those 3 tiers and between those 3 tiers. So we are going to talk a little bit about how to do that starting now. The first thing that I want to address is I think that you often think about, or you often hear in zone offense, the idea that if you swing the disc back and forth enough times, you'll tire the defense out and something here. I don't have a clip of this. I focus on people that were doing zone offense well, except for Machine by and large. But I think that you can see this maybe from your own games or from games that you've watched. But I think that more and more that zone philosophy is being shown to be not true. And I think that that is like a process of hoping that something will happen instead of creating the circumstance that you want. So like we said, we want to make intentional, timely attacking throws, and swinging it back and forth and hoping that something opens up doesn't really fit that bill. And instead, what I want to suggest is that swinging is a tool to achieve one of the goals that we have, that swinging will extend the defense. So if you think about attacking the first tier, if we throw the disc wide, like a 20 or 30 yard swing, that has the function of extending the first tier of defense. However, if we are playing a zone that doesn't rely on first tier defense pressure, so like a 1-3-3 or a 2-3-2, those zones will not be bothered by a swing. They are already well calibrated downfield to accept the change of field. And when we throw a big swing, we're just throwing it towards more defenders. So what we want to do first, our first important move to attack that front field tier of defense is to compress. I have a very short video clip of our main compression move for the front field tier. I'll try to share if I can. This is what we on machine will call a chisel. So is this coming through?
Yes.
Great. So we have just sent the disc to like the far third of the field.
Janice with the disc. Janice with his little scooper over to.
You can see Pavel, who I'm happy to see is on this call, just making a move straight up field, if not a little bit towards the against the force. So he's got plenty of room to get that, and then hits one over the top, gets it back. Again, a sort of mini chisel there. Again, a chisel, and we're kind of out of the zone now. So going back real quick, I'm going to see if I can slow this down so we can look at it a little bit more intentionally. Yeah, perfect. There's not a lot of pressure in this first tier, but this movement does a lot of good things. So we get the disc to the far side and go towards the middle of the field. This guy on the near side, right here, just kind of naturally comes down. When he sees the disc, you're as a defender kind of drawn to it. And then he opens up space behind himself that we can throw over. So this is, again, a very simple action. I'm going to stop sharing. That not only keeps the disc in the middle of the field, not only keeps us moving forward out of the way of any like sideline trapping situation, but it also importantly serves to compress the defense. Brings everyone closer to the disc so that spaces behind them are farther. I think that is the core of compression, that we bring people closer to the ball in spaces that they can't reduce our motion downfield. When we continue to do this, defenses adjust, and they will adjust by having off that movement. So if someone chisels towards the upfield space right in front of the disc, you'll have a defender peeling off and jumping at them, or the mark will jump at them. And while that move may cut off the chisel, if the mark jumps, what it has really done is even further reduce pressure on the thrower, so that we can throw a swing, maybe a yardage gaining swing this time instead of going straight across. And it helps reduce the lateral coverage that the front tier of defense has against our offense. So when the cup or the front tier of defense compresses, they're covering a smaller amount of the field laterally, and so we have more room to go up the field on the side. So in general, our goal for the front tier especially is to compress the front tier with chisels until we can go around them with swings. And then once we swing, that swing like we talked about at the beginning of this conversation about the front tier, the swing naturally pulls the defense apart. It naturally extends the frontier of defense so that we can chisel again. So we have that, this, what I think is a really easy to follow progression to, we default to chisel, and when that gets too hard to do, what it means is that there's a bigger option open in a different part of the field. So when it becomes too hard to chisel, then we can swing and we'll find ourselves with lots of space on the side of the field. Not because we hoped that would happen, but because we made it happen by chiseling. Cool. That's the frontier. Do folks have any questions or things that we feel like we're missing here before we move on to some other stuff?
I have a question.
Sure.
Sorry. Can you define what you mean by chisel, whether it's a specific cut or a specific movement that's creating the open space?
Yep. I'll try to draw it up on this whiteboard here. So let's say I'm going to use hearts for defensive players and stars for offensive players. So our hearts are in a 3-person cup, and our stars are handling for the offense. So what I mean by a chisel is that this person right here, this heart behind, or the star behind the disc, the chisel is the cut that this person goes straight up into the space in front of the disc. There's kind of a natural advantage with the rules here, because this this heart right here can't get too close to the disc, because otherwise it's a double team. So we have this space in front of the disc free for essentially an uncontested pass. I played the clip earlier, and I can to try to show that one again, and we'll see it again in some of the other clips I have. But Joy, does that answer your question? We're looking for a as we can get without doing it to a handoff to this person, and then have that movement will cause the other two parts perhaps of the cup to compress more, and then we'll have more space over here and over here to roll down the field once they've compressed.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
I think so. I think that might be what we call crashing the cup.
Yep, and I think the big thing that I would want to make as a factor to distinguish crashing the cup is that the chisel comes specifically from the backfield. That way, not only does the person receiving the pass have a look at the whole upfield space and maybe is able to make a throw through the cup when they receive, whereas somebody who's crashing from the downfield space is coming back towards the disc and has to turn around to find any pass. And then you see that angle of this cut is going, if I can get kind of weird with this, I'm going to do it, is going at a perpendicular angle to the space between the person on the mark and the top of the cup. Mm-hmm. I don't have my angles perfect, so I'm going to fix them. But that is to make the biggest space between those two people. So he's going at an angle that gives him the maximum amount of space to throw through once he receives a pass here. So the ideal circumstance is that we receive this chisel right in front of the disc and are able to throw it to another star who's maybe here. And even if we don't do that, then it has the effect of compressing the cup and allowing us more space on either side. Okay. Does that make sense?
I think so. It's always easier when you see it in play.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, like I said, I think we should have a couple more examples that will help us figure that out.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, you bet. What other questions do we have before we start the next part? Cool. Feel free to drop anything in the chat that you're thinking about. And if anything is not clear or being incompletely explained, feel free to holler on that tip too. Sweet. Moving forward, so that is our way to break down the frontier of the defense. Again, attacking timely, intentional movements to first compress the defense so that we can go around that. And then once our going around it has extended it, then we go through again. So chisels to compress and swings to extend. That's the big upshot for the first tier. Cool. Excellent. So then I think the next piece is what do we do with the midfield and the deep space? And I think for those things we have two main jobs, not only to compress and extend, so we'll count those together, to distend the defense, but to do that in what's happening in our team's backfield with their attack on the front field tier. So we want to not just abstractly compress and extend downfield, but to do that so that we can move the disc through. So I'm going to flip back to our PowerPoint real quick. Just to recap here on the frontier stuff and the midfield and deep space. So these are those circles that I was talking about. If you imagine each defender having a circle, which is any pass that they can get to, that they could make a play on, would fall in those circles. And what they want to do is make the edges of those circles barely touch each other or have a small space between them so that they can have their circles cover the maximum amount of the field without overlapping or having too big of spaces in between. And because we know that that's what the defense wants to do, we are able to take advantage of that. So hopefully my little animations are going to work here, but if they don't, it's going to be okay. So if you consider this player, the purple player right in the middle, is going to make a move to extend the defense. So if they cut between this space, they are going to do two things. They are going to draw a defender with them and create confusion about which defender should go with them. And that's in general what we want to do. Downfield movement is make as many people think about us as possible and exploit this this idea that we want to be like perfectly calibrated in our space from the disc. So this right side wing defender, the X with the circle, I'll put a little star for them. This player knows that they have to take up a lot of space here, but they don't exactly perfectly know what's happening behind them. And this is the weakness in any zone defense, since it's organized around space instead of a particular person. We can create confusion in the defense about who is guarding what person, what space we're going to attack. So if you consider a situation where this person in purple cuts into this part of the field, if no one follows them, this is a 35 or 40 yard pass to this space where we love to throw, which is a pass I hope that we can make. If someone does follow, I'm gonna clear my drawings, then that's opening another space. And from following the principles of our movement, these are extending the defense moves, especially a deep cut is an extending the defense move. So if this right wing defender goes upfield to make a play or to defend this person, then we have a great space for a person from across the field to come into that space and attack. Ideally, I think they'd be a little bit closer to start that move, but they are able to take advantage of that movement. If instead the deep defender pinches towards the sideline and goes, this blue guy up top has a lot of space to cover this hammer, especially if this big diagonal cut leaves that space for them to go into, for the blue offensive player to go into. So what you see in these movements are what I really want to emphasize with our downfield movement in terms of compressing and extending, is that the best of these cuts are crossing multiple lines, both the depth and the width of the field. And that is the kind of movement that forces the defense to decide who they're going to guard and when. If you take, I don't know how folks have learned zone offense, but when I was learning to play, it was you have two poppers and they sit in the middle of the field and hopefully they can get a pass from the handlers that goes through the cup. And then you have two wings and they should go as deep as they can and just stay there or catch a hammer, but mainly just go to the sideline and stand there. And I think that what that kind of zone offense setup does is allows the defense to more completely calibrate where the threat is and specifically who they are responsible for. And when we as an offense force them to hand off responsibility for offensive threats, change the spaces that offensive threats come from, and force the defense to guard a bigger part of the field, then we're going to be more successful as an offense. 1 second, I want to make sure that I'm seeing. Sorry, go ahead. I'm gonna go back real. Patrick, I missed your question a few minutes ago when we were talking about the frontier, so I'll go back to that real quick. Patrick says, do you have strong feelings about the number of designated handlers, 3 versus 4 or 2? I don't. I want to not. I think that what is important is that we have 2 options, and that is, it is not going to surprise you to hear the option to chisel, option to swing, or the option to compress and the option to extend. And I think that that can reliably come from handlers, but it doesn't have to. So I guess I think that I would say that it to some degree depends on what kind of defense you're facing. And we can get into this completely now or later, but my sense is that almost every zone overloads the field in some space, and you can either try to match that overload or create your own overload somewhere else. So an example is a 4-person cup creates an overload in the front tier. And we could put 4 handlers back and kind of match that space. And I would much rather put 2 handlers back and overload the 2-person midfield tier. That's where the defense is most vulnerable. I've been a part of really effective zone offenses that have just had two handlers. And so that one handler would chisel and then we'd hit a downfield swing. So I think that the particular set number, it's not, I don't have strong feelings about it, except to say that if we are trying to score downfield, then it's more helpful to have more options downfield. So I would essentially caution you against having 4. Sweet. Nick has a, this seems like a midfield tier question. That's a great time for talking about this. Nick says, is there a binary option of looks for the midfield? For instance, in the front field option, there's the chisel or swing. And then what are the 2 options for the downfield space? I think that that's a great question. And I think that what we are looking to do is create, I wonder if I can do this easily. And if I can't, then we'll do it the hard way. What we're looking to create is 2-on-1s. The problem with having that binary option downfield, in my mind, is that we are not sure what throw we'll be able to get off. So in this situation that we see in front of us on the whiteboard, where we have a 3-person cup, the binary options that are like right in the middle of the field cut off by the structure of that cup. So I think when we think about those binary options, what we think of is finding 2-on-1s that are like these folks. And a binary option that you could create is a compressing move from this guy to come in here and draw this defender towards the disc and towards the middle of the field. And that either this guy in the star can stay here and get hit with a hammer, or can come down farther and get a break pass from upfield. The closest that I would say that we get to this is that in terms of compressing and extending, what we want to do in general is compress the middle tier to the front tier and then extend the middle and the deep tier. So I think that my preferred moves are something like this top blue guy coming across to draw the deep defender deep, and having this deeper left side downfield guy come in on the angle that he's coming to, so that we have big spaces in the middle center of the field. And I'll show an example of that real quick. I think Sockeye is a team that I look up to and fear when we are playing against them playing, because they do a great job of finding that space in the middle. So I'm gonna try to optimize screen sharing for video. And we'll see another chisel to start here. Is this video showing up?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Excellent. So they have centered the disc, and we start out with a chisel. And then real quick, as we, this guy right here tries to recover because he is in not in the correct position. You see that this is a defense right now that is very extended, right? The distance between the thrower and the next closest defender is probably 5 yards, I would say. And what they're going to do, because extension, is hit this player here. He is in a great spot, and I think that this is one of the most dangerous parts of the field for any zone defense. You can see, count them down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 defensive players, and that means that our 7th is the deep, and he's off the screen to the right. So they have sent somebody deep. You can see, actually they haven't. So this is going back to the zone defense conversation. This is bad defense from the red team because there is a defender who no one is even close to deeper than. And if he came down to help out, then he would effectively calibrate and compress the defense to deny this pass. But instead what happens is extended defense, which unfortunately chose to extend itself. We're going to hit him right up the middle and lose or give up 20 or 25 yards. So just going back real quick, we start with a chisel, and then the extended defense gets exposed right up the middle. I'm gonna stop that share real quick and see. Nick, does that answer your question, or how can we do a better job of talking about that?
No, I think that gets to the beginning of it. I think that I have, I think the way you almost opened that by saying that to expect there to be binary options at all times is very unpredictable because the front of the zone is there makes a lot of sense to me. And I think maybe something we've got to think about always telling players is that while they might be creating 2 options themselves, it is likely that one or both will be cut off by another part of the zone, and that doesn't make them failures as they try to do that stuff. I think that's the hard part of being a popper.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think the ideal circumstance is that we sync the compressions of a handler going up into the cup and drawing the cup and maybe even the middle tier of defense down with somebody doing the same thing in the downfield space and then making that big open middle space that Sockeye has had. So I think this is where we get into that second job of the downfield defense, which is to sync these movements with the movements that are happening in the backfield. And I think that that's a really good way to conceptualize it from like a full team offensive organization standpoint, which is that let's sync up our compression movements. So compression movement from downfield with a compression movement from the backfield. And then same way, an extension movement from the backfield, from the down, an extension movement from the backfield. And the way that, so we just talked about the first one, the way that the second would work, if I can go back to my share real quick, is team. So a syncing extension movements would be something like you see the handler or person closest to the backfield right here. The star could do an extension movement to go deep, right? And that would have the effect of likely drawing this X-wing defender that he goes right through. So that's one extension movement. And then the second extension movement is then that space over here, all of this stuff is really opened up, and then we're able to make a swing pass into that space. So movements like a chisel and a cut toward the disc will we'll combine compression of the middle tier and the front tier and leave a big gap between the middle tier and the deep space. Or you can have extension movements where you pull the middle tier away from the disc, and then we have more space to swing and more space to attack the middle of the field. I think there was a question. Hafiz says, should the handlers and cutters both be on the same page of whether they are compressing or extending, and can they also achieve success by doing the opposite of each other? Yeah, I think so. So we just talked through some of that, but I think like you can sync these movements in a different way, like chiseling to compress in the front tier, but then dragging the middle tier away from the disc leaves you with lot of space. And I personally think that this is a particularly effective way to do it, to put your handlers upfield of the frontier of defense, and have your downfield players drag that mid tier even deeper, and then the handlers can just take that space between the front tier and the middle tier. So I think the answer is totally yes. I think the main thing is to have those happen at the same time. And I think Nick points out really well that this is like a really big occasion for growth mindset for players, which is because you were open or because you created a good option, that doesn't mean that you're definitely going to get it, and that is okay and good. And that what we do as downfield players is create good options over and over and over until we hit them. Any other questions about this downfield, middle tier and deep space stuff? I think these are good things to talk and think about. This is closing in on the end of the scheduled material, and we can talk more about scenarios. We can talk about more about this middle and deep space offensive movement, and then just as a last piece, I have some individual stuff to think about, since this is mostly like on a field system level and not on a individual behavior level. So wherever folks want to go, I'm happy to talk more about. Ooh, and I have one more fun clip. Joe says, in the extension example you just gave, aren't you putting yourself at significant risk of not having any options late in the stall count? If that star handler pushes upfield, I just imagine that the wing defender not guarding them and instead defending the swing space and being very well positioned to stop any cut into that space. I think that's a solid point. I think this is one of the difficult components of talking about this, is that this is really, I think that question largely answered by that first principle, which is that we're going to make timely attacking intentional movements. And I think that in a way, that principle is at odds with, can we always make sure that we have a safe option? My contention in general is that if we're always making attacking moves, that either that attacking move will open an option on its other side. So it's like Joe, as a very accomplished thrower, you know this, that if you make a strong move to the invert forehand side, you will either be able to throw that invert or the mark will overcommit such that you can throw the backhand around. And I think that that's the real principle that we're looking at, that when we make strong attacking moves, we have either that option or the option that the defense is forced to leave us. I think in that particular example, that the force side handler is still open. So if the frontier of defense is really compressed, then he can take a swing to the trap side. And if they're not, he will have an uncontested chisel. And if the wing stays down and compressed, then he should have left space over himself. So I think that the choices that a defense makes, it can never be, if we are making attacking moves, the defense can never choose to guard two things. So they're always either going to take at most or leave both open. Is that helpful, or does that feel too flippant? We'll find out. I'll talk to Dan. Dan asked a question. Curious to hear what drills you do to work on these timing and principles outside of just scrimmaging. So we will straight up do a field that is something like 10 yards deep, 3-on-3, and our goal is to either chisel or swing around those three defenders. So we practice that frontier stuff just by itself, sometimes saying you can only chisel or you can only swing, so that we see how difficult it is when we don't have both of those options. And then from the space, we'll do things like have a single defender in a rectangular box, and then two offensive players cut in that kind of X pattern. So one from the top right cut into the bottom left, the other the opposite, and our goal is to gain as many yards as possible. And though we think that yardage is important, the idea is more, did we successfully force the defender to choose something and give up something valuable? So that's how we do it in practice. Cool. Yeah. What other questions do folks have, or where should we go? Yeah. Joe, this is a good point. Defenses that give you the more difficult throw consistently, and I think that this is a good question, and my default mode in answering this question is to say that if they're giving us the more difficult throw consistently, so they're giving up a 40-yard hammer every time, and like, why can't we consistently hit that? And there's 20 wind or something like that. The thing that I have found that's successful is to continue to compress the defense, so that if we are able to keep compressing them, then that 40-yard throw becomes 35 or 30 or 25, and then it becomes easier. So continue to punish them with the chisels that'll keep us in the middle of the field away from danger, that keeps us moving forward, and do that all the way downfield until there's compression in that frontier, and then what used to be a more difficult throw or a smaller space has become bigger. So I think that's true if we don't continue to probe and manipulate the defense. That they can always give us a throw that's like maybe at the edge of our abilities to make. But if we compressing, then that window gets bigger. Or if the window doesn't get bigger, then that incremental window is enough for us to continue to move through. Sweet. Yeah, Christy asked if there are teams that I think are particularly good at zone offense. I do. I think I mentioned. I think that Sockeye is good at it. They at times default to making fewer attacking throws and movements that I'd like. But I think that they do a really nice job. You can see both their downfield players making really nice extension movements and finding spaces where no defenders are near them. And also their handlers chiseling until they can chisel no more, and then taking big swings, and then chiseling, can chisel no more, and taking big swings. And really, I think it's like it's not very satisfying or maybe beautiful looking, but it's really effective. And then I think another team that I think is really good at it, and I wanted to share this one last clip because I think it's instructive when we think about making attacking throws, is Ring of Fire in the men's division. And so I'm going to bring this clip up real quick. Optimize for screen sharing. So can we see this clip okay?
Yes.
Sweet. So what we're going to see here is the offense consistently take easy and safe passes to the trap side of the field, which is the far side. And our pal with the heart, this is number 25 on sockeye named Duncan Lynn. He's a really good and opportunistic defender. He's never really going to get engaged by anybody on the offense, so never really has to change his calibration and can spend this whole point looking around for a way to menace. And you'll see him continue to look downfield throughout this point until he makes a play. But this is Ring taking easy and then a couple of not attacking options to the trap side. So here we go. So Duncan throughout the whole point hasn't been engaged and is able to jump in there and make a play. So I think that in that situation, go back to this is kind of why we'd prefer to have this cut coming from the open side towards the break side, so that the offensive player can see, the offensive cutter can see any defenders. But when we have the defense to our backs, as they do here, he can't see Duncan coming from the, comes in and makes a play. Cool. Awesome. I think that the last thing that I'd want to share with just a couple minutes that we have left is getting back to this. Like I said, we talked a lot about things from a team system perspective. And so when we talk about individual things that make this team system stuff happen, I think here are four big ones that you can emphasize with your players. The first one is to make a map of the field and not, the field's boundaries don't change, but to make a map of where the defenders are. And if you find that someone has left your vision of where they should be, or that there's someone new in there, it's impossible to see the whole field the whole time. But having a sense of where players are, so it's like, oh, somebody new has arrived, that means the space where they used to be is open. Similarly, if you look up, catch the ball, and the middle is nowhere to be found, or the one of the wings, or you can't see the deep defender, it means that that is a viable option. So making a map and having a general or as specific as possible an idea of where all the defenders are, that's a really helpful thing to do as a handler. We talked about this before, but making attacking throws at low stall counts. As the stall count rises, there is more of an opportunity for defenders to correctly calibrate their distance between the threats that you see and that they are increasingly seeing. There's time for them to predict what you're going to do. So through the cup or when we throw hammers, low stall count is the best time for attacking throws. Third is keeping eye contact with the thrower. The part of the difficulty with zone offense is that the thrower and receiver may have different ideas of when that throw option is open. And we always want to be deferring to the thrower. I am a huge fan of upside down throws and no look passes to beat zones. And when we give deference to our thrower and allow our throwers more space to create those kinds of options, then we are having a more diverse attack. Rarely do we need to run at like full breakneck speed in a zone. So when we are moving, keeping eye contact with the thrower allows us to be an option for longer. And then to one of the points that we were just talking about, if you're in a spot where you can't get it, make sure that a defender's coming with you. If a defender is not coming with you, then be in a spot where you can get it. So those are just some individual pieces to this. And I'm happy to stay on and talk and answer more questions more. But most of all, I wanted to thank Coach Christie for having me out and wanted to encourage everyone to make a donation to CPU. Other disc organizations around the country are not doing half of the programming that CPU is doing. That takes a lot of work and is a great resource, and we would love it if you could help support that. So thanks so much for being here, and please support CPU, and happy to hang out and talk more if folks would like to. No, Joe, I said they were good. I love no looks. I think I used to coach YCC, which was my favorite coaching gig, I think, and told those guys when they asked if they were allowed to throw hammers, I said there was a tool for every job, and it is true. If you've got that tool, there is a job for it. Yeah.